Last week, Betsy and I went to Memphis, Tennessee to see our daughter and son-in-law. And it was really a spur of the moment trip. We woke up one morning and said, okay, let's go. And there were a lot of considerations to make for that trip, one of which was, do you think our car will make it? What if we have car trouble? Now, our car is running fine. It's a good, okay to good car. But the question came up, what if we have car trouble? And I won't tell you who asked the question, but it wasn't me. But anyway, we got in the car, we drove all the way to Memphis, we made it just fine. We unloaded our luggage into their apartment, and we had a great time with them. The next morning after our arrival, we noticed that our car needed an oil change badly. Now, I won't tell you who noticed that we needed that, but it wasn't me. So I said, yes, I'll go Saturday morning and I'll go get the oil changed, which I did. And I drive to this oil place and I pull into the garage and I wait and wait and wait for my oil to change. It took them forever to change my oil. But they finally got through, and we went to get some groceries at the grocery store and then came back to the apartment. And Lacey and Betsy were moving our car out to the street because that's where we have to park. And they came back in and they said, we have bad news. I said, what? They said, flat tire. Now, I won't tell you whose fault it was, but it wasn't mine. So I go out there and I check the flat tire. We call AAA to come out. They change the flat tire for the spare tire. I have to set an appointment to get new tires because this flat tire is unfixable. Finally, I get an appointment after waiting on the phone a long time. Finally, we got to take it in. Finally, we got 2 new tires put on our car, but it took them 2 hours to do it. And during those 2 hours, I am waiting and waiting and waiting when it finally dawns on me, okay, God, I get it. We're in this series called While We Wait, and I'm having to practice what I preach. We all wait. We wait for the game to start. We wait for 5 o'clock to get here. We wait for the children to come home. We wait for the right job to open up. We wait for a casserole we put in the oven for 30 minutes until it's finally ready to eat. We set a doctor's appointment, we walk in, we check in, and then we sit down in what is called the waiting room. You go have dinner at a restaurant, and someone comes out and takes your order and finally delivers your order, and that person that delivers your food is called a waiter, which is interesting because we're the ones having to wait. We hate to wait. Yet, in this pandemic, we are learning there are actually things that we can do that are great things while we wait. What do you do while you wait? Other than social media and watching TV, what are some things you can do while you're waiting, not on your relationship with God, but in your relationship with God? And that's why we're having this series. What you do while you wait is more important than you'll ever know. Last week, we said that one of the favorite questions that Jesus had to ask people was, what do you really want? You ask kids that question and they'll say toys or games or a new bicycle. You ask adults that question and they'll say a new job or a better paying job or a car that won't give you trouble. That's what we want off the top of our heads. But psychologists say that everybody really wants 4 things. Children, teenagers, adults, we all want 4 things. We want attention, acceptance, appreciation, and affection. And psychologists go on to say that if any one of those is lacking, or we're not getting very much of one of those, or if we're getting too much of one of those, then that can lead to us making poor decisions. Also, psychologists say that we are looking for all 4 of those things in every relationship that we have. In all relationships, we're looking for attention, acceptance, appreciation, and affection. Now I want you to take those 4 things and lock them away because we're going to come back to those things. But we need to remember what those things are, because today we're going to talk about our relationship with God and trusting God. That while we wait is our opportunity to trust God more. Yet, it's very difficult sometimes to do that. So we're going to talk about why that's so difficult to trust God more, and then a couple of areas where we can trust God while we wait. There are two spiritual pathways that Christians take. And I'm not assuming that, if you're watching, that you are a Christian, because you may not be, but really Christians take two spiritual pathways. One pathway is where we are going to try really, really hard. That's one way people want to relate to God and try to get to God. And they say, in my relationship with God, I'm going to try really, really hard to be a good person, to be a good Christian, to sin less. And really what we're talking about is behavior modification, which is good because our behavior needs to be modified. The issue with that in our relationship with God is when we're trying to do good and be perfect and sin less, and what happens is those things lead to frustration and ultimately failure when we're trying really, really hard in our relationship to God to merit His favor. Now, there is another spiritual pathway to take, and that is to trust God more. To trust God. Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 6 says, and without faith, it is impossible to please Him, for whoever would draw near to God must believe that He exists and that He rewards those who seek Him. I mean, it says it right there. What pleases God? We all want to please God. What pleases God? It says to trust Him more. So you might think, well, that's the easy one to take. And it's the obvious choice. It's the obvious pathway for people to go on in their relationship with God. And yet most people don't. Why? Because in relationships, we yearn for attention, acceptance, appreciation, and affection. We yearn for those things. So what we do, whether we intend to or not, in our human relationships, we are looking for all of those things, but all of those things have a condition attached to them. My friends accept me, but there's a condition to that. I am appreciated at work, but there is a condition to that. All of those things occurring in human relationships are all conditional. And we take that and we project that on our relationship with God, and we think our relationship with God is also conditional. That I have to do more to get God's attention. I have to become better in order for God to accept me. I have to perform at a higher level in order for God to love me. So I have to work harder to receive these things from God. And that's spiritual pathway number one. The issue with that is we didn't start our relationship with God that way. We started our relationship with God by realizing I am broken and I need Jesus, because Jesus is the only one who can reconcile me with God. And so I'm going to accept Jesus Christ as my Lord, my Savior, the forgiver of my sins, the leader of my life, the boss of my life, and I'm going to give my life to Him. And so we make that initial decision to have a relationship with God, and it's all based and bathed in grace and faith. It's all just grace and faith. The problem is many people don't stay in that grace and faith. They leave grace and faith and they begin to think, I've got to do more. I've got to perform better. I've got to do more things. I've got to become better in order to receive these things from God. And we leave grace and faith behind. Now, this isn't new. This has been going on for a long time in churches and with Christians. I'll give you one example out of many that I could. In Luke chapter 18, in verse 10, it says, 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. Now, the Pharisee is the religious guy. He's the church guy. That's the Pharisee. And the tax collector was considered the scum of the earth. Maybe not now, but then he was considered the scum of the earth. Then verse 11, it says, the Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give a tenth of all I get. I mean, can you see the arrogance of this Pharisee? And then in verse 13 it says, but the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. You see the humility of the tax collector. And then this is said, I tell you that this man, the tax collector, rather than the other, the Pharisee, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. See, pathway number one always leads to a comparison to other people. And it always leads to a list of bad sins, which are it's usually a list of sins with which we do not struggle. Now, here's the point. Waiting is our opportunity not to try harder, but to trust God more. As we wait, that's not for us to try really hard to do more, be more, and perform better. It is our opportunity to trust God more. See, we think that if I will transform myself and do more things, I will receive God's love. And the truth is, we already have God's love. We have God's attention. We have God's acceptance. We have God's appreciation. We have God's affection. And because we have those things, the interesting thing is that is what leads to transformation. So let's talk about trusting God more. Faith is a very interesting thing because you cannot get it by joining a Bible study group. You cannot get it by talking about it all the time. You cannot get it by hoping for it or thinking about it or wishing for it all the time. Faith is like a muscle. The more you exercise a muscle, the stronger it's going to get. And that's what faith is. You take the little faith that you have and you use it trusting in God. And what happens is that faith is going to grow, it's going to be stretched, and God's going to bless that stretching. And so the more you use faith, the stronger it's going to get. So you have little faith which grows into medium faith, which grows then into a big faith. So while we wait, there are two areas that you can exercise this trusting in God more. In fact, I believe this week you'll face these two things. One is we can trust God when under pressure. When we are under pressure, that's when we trust God more. We trust Him whenever we face all this anxiety. And some of you are facing a tremendous amount of pressure right now. You're facing pressure with your finances. Some of you are facing pressure emotionally during this time. Some of you are facing pressure of a deadline, pressure at work, pressure at school. Parents are under a lot of pressure right now as well. And so usually people, when they are under pressure, they think to themselves, well, I can figure this out and I can get out of it and I can relieve the pressure. I can release it if I do these things. And we always have this go-to list that we use in order to relieve the pressure. And so somebody will say, I'll just complain to whomever will listen to me. I'll just complain and complain and complain, and that'll get it off my chest. Or I'll go shopping and buy something new, and that will make me feel better about myself and relieve the pressure. Or I'll cheat on that test in school, and that will relieve the pressure that I'm feeling right now. Or I will eat all of this, or I will drink all of that, and that's going to relieve the pressure. The problem is when we go down that list and we do those things, the pressure is still there. And on our list, we have our top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and usually around 8 or 9, we have God. Can I challenge you to move God up to the top of that list? That whenever you feel pressure, that you just trust God. You say, God, here it is. Here's my anxiety. Here's my stress. Here's where I'm feeling pressure, and I am handing it off to you. I'm casting all my anxiety on you. God welcomes it. It's not like God is in heaven and you reveal to him your pressure and he's like, whoa, I didn't see that one coming, or I don't want that one. He welcomes it. He says in Psalm 50, in verse 15, then call on me when you are in trouble, and I will rescue you, and you will give me glory. He says, call on me, and I will rescue you. So this week, when you face pressure, call on the Lord. Trust in him. I promise you this week, there will be something that comes along where you will feel a weight of pressure on your shoulders. And that is your opportunity to trust God more. It's not about trying harder. It's about trusting God more. So you trust God more under pressure, and you trust God more with people. You trust God with the people that are in your life. You trust God when you cross paths with someone. You trust God with your family and your extended family, but you also trust God, especially with those people who disappoint you. People disappoint us whenever we have an expectation for them to fulfill something in our lives and they don't fulfill it. And the truth is, people can never fulfill all the needs that we have in our lives. They just can't. When you turn to a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a spouse or a parent or a friend to fulfill all the needs in your life, you are setting yourself up for a massive letdown and a massive disappointment, because God never intended for anybody to do that. Nobody can fulfill all the needs in our lives. But what happens is whenever somebody doesn't meet our expectations and doesn't fulfill our needs, we point to them and we say something is wrong with them. They have a problem and they need to change. Your problem is not with other people. Your problem is your response to other people. Because other people are never, ever going to be able to fulfill all of your needs. The answer is not for them to change. The answer is for you to trust in God with them and with you. Isaiah says it in chapter 2, verse 22. He says, stop trusting in mere humans who have but a breath in their nostrils. Why hold them in esteem? All they have in their nostrils is a breath. Think about that in comparison to our Almighty God. And then Jeremiah 17 verse 7 says, but blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. This week, someone is going to disappoint you. And that is your opportunity to say, you know something? While we wait, and this person has let me down, I'm going to turn them over to God. God, help them. God, encourage them. God, help them trust in you and turn to you. And God, with my heart, will you help me to seek for you to fulfill all of my needs and not mere humans? You trust God under pressure. You trust God with people. And he is trustworthy. You already have his attention. You have his acceptance. You have his appreciation. And you have his affection. And therefore, trust in him with all things. We live in a world of weight. All of us will experience those times in our lives that are mountaintop experiences where we have fulfillment and where we have accomplishment and where we have achievement. All of us will have that kind of experience in our lives. And all of us will have those times when we wait for something we do not have and may never have. Why is that? I don't know. How long will the season last? I don't know. Does it matter what we do while we wait? It matters more than you can imagine and more than you can dream. It's not about trying really, really hard. It is about trusting God more. And while we wait is our opportunity to do just that. What you do while you wait is more important than you'll ever know.